I'm Nick Pettit.
I'm Jason Seifer.
And you're watching the Treehouse Show, your weekly dose of internets where we talk about all things web design, web development, and more.
In this episode, we'll be talking about data binding, nesting components, image zooms, and more.
Let's check it out. First up is this really cool website where you can test any website for low vision conditions. So this can help you with accessibility testing. So here I've just typed in a Wikipedia article on dandelions that has this scientific name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but you can go up here and pick a low vision condition. So I'm going to pick cataracts here, and this is just, of course, a simulation, but it can give you some sense of what people with these different low vision conditions might see when they come to your website. So the site looks a lot blurrier here, obviously, so things like this text might be a little bit more difficult to read. So if you know that your audience does consist of a lot of people that might have some of these conditions, you may want to try to optimize for some of them. For example, this text is a little bit more legible. It would probably need to be larger and a bit more spaced out and so on, but you get the idea. Let's pick some of these other ones. So these are different color blindness conditions. So if you look over here at the picture of this dandelion here, you'll see what that looks like. And of course, there's monochromacy, which is completely grayscale. And I assume actually these are using CSS filters. I didn't look into it, but I think that's probably what's going on here. So pretty clever usage of CSS filters for testing accessibility. I thought this was pretty neat.
Yeah, low vision support. Nick, I just want to say, I don't say it enough, but you are a vision.
You're a vision.
Thank you. Next up, we have a plugin called jQuery.my, and this is building support for two-way data binding in jQuery. So what does that mean? You might be used to seeing data binding in frameworks like Angular and Ember and React. Well, this brings all of that over to jQuery. So the example that is on the page right here, there is this form. It's got two inputs, one for name and one for age. And then there is a JSON object, which is the data. And then you call this my function, pass it a UI, and what it binds to in the data, as well as the data object. And then you get this little form right here. And you'll see it says drag me. And watch, as I drag this, you'll see in the middle column, the age updates in real time as the slider is dragged. Now this is all the code that you need to get that done. So we can start editing the name here if we want to make it pluralized. And you can see this all updates in the data attribute right here. Now there are a ton of different demos on the site right here, and this is going to work with almost every jQuery UI plugin that there is. So here we see sorting and filtering. We've got this age being updated to filter this little chart right here. It also works on maps. Here's an example with a map, and you'll notice this has a zoom of 2.5x and 5x, and then it shows you the data over on the right here. So we can see if we're going slow, that zoom level changes in the data attribute. Now, another thing right here, this Bezier curve example was built entirely in jQuery, and you can see, once again, as I drag this all around using the drag and drop and adjust these sliders, everything automatically changes in real time. You can look at the code and see exactly what went into it, or you can go through and check out the API. Now, this is a relatively complicated API, but they do their best to simplify it down. So everything works on objects, but there is the ability to nest forms. But at the heart, it's actually very, very easy to use. So we just give it some data, and then it all works by something called a manifest. Specify the data, initialization, and UI bindings, then just call that and you are good to go. Now, I'm not going to get into the entire API on the show, but definitely check this out if you're primarily using jQuery on your projects and you wanted to get more into data binding and maybe didn't want to check out a full framework like Angular or Ember or React or something like that.
Very cool stuff. Well, next up is this really cool blog post on nesting CSS components.
Then the CSS components, they just settled into a house and they want to decorate, really make it their own. That's what this is talking about, right?
That's a bit of a stretch, but
nesting.
Okay, we'll go with that. So this article points out 3 different ways that you can nest CSS components. So what does that mean? Well, let's just go down to the example here. Let's say that we have this header and we also have a button, and we want the button to be a certain size on its own, but when we put it inside of a header, we actually want maybe a smaller button. So how do you do that? Well, there's a couple of different ways that you could create these nested components. So
easy, we just give it an ID and apply all the formatting right on the ID no matter where it is.
That is terrible advice. So here's the first option, descendant selector. So you have a selector that looks like this. You say, well, normally we have this button class, but then we're also going to have this descendant selector where we have the header class, then the button class, and then we sort of reset the font size. Well, that's okay. The problem is, where do we put a component like that? Does that go in our header CSS, or in this case, SCSS file, or does it go in the button file? And it's kind of hard to split these components up when you're using descendant selectors, and it may not sound like a big deal, but it can be in a pretty large project, such as an e-commerce site where multiple people are working on the CSS. You really have to have standards for this kind of stuff, or it can get out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, I think that's what's important to note about this, is it's for larger sites with a lot of people working on it. If you're just doing a small one-page site, like, yeah, throw the CSS everywhere. Who cares?
Whatever.
You only have yourself to hate later on. No, this is for standards in larger organizations.
Exactly. So option 2 is variations, right? So let's say we have this class button small, and then we do something like this. We say, well, we're going to have a header, and then we have this button, and then we're also going to have this button small class, which is slightly more of a specific selector, and it will change the font size to something like this. But the problem with that is, what happens when you want, say, a font size that's slightly different or slightly smaller? Do you create another variation of button?
You create a whole new website.
Just a little bit smaller? No, neither one of those things, because that can start to get pretty out of hand, because you can really start to lose track of where all of these different variations are used, and you might start to look at a CSS file that has a ton of different variations, and if you're trying to clean it up, you might look at that and think, well, which one of these are used where? Is just a little smaller actually just a little smaller than button small? It can be hard to tell. Option 3 is what's called adopted child, and this is an interesting technique where you have, say, this header class and then header item, and if we scroll down a little further here, you have something actually that looks like this. So you have header item plus the button class. So you have the button class just like you normally would, so there's the font size of 1em, and that would go in your button file, but then you might have something like this in your header.css file, where it says header, header item, and it adjusts the font size here for anything that is inside the header. And the reason this works is because of selector specificity. This is a slightly more specific selector than this button class, so it's going to get overridden, and it will actually apply this font size. And that's a great way to sort of break up all of these different styles and group them appropriately.
Nick, if you're going with the adopted child approach, when do you think is the right time to tell these DOM elements?
I'm not really sure I can answer that, Jason. I have no idea.
I just think you really need to put some thought into that before you.
It's true, before you just go adopting child elements. There's a couple of more options listed here, but I will let you check those out on your own.
Next up, we have a very quick plugin called zoom.js. This is from one of the authors of Twitter Bootstrap and implements Medium's image zoom for jQuery. Now, if you have never seen image zooming on the website Medium, there is a demo right here. So look at this. We've got this image in the page, and when I click it, whoa, here we are. Oh, wow, it's zoomed. Wow. The web page, roller coaster, I don't know, I lost track. Here's another one. Whoa, are we actually at the beach in black and white in front of these palm trees like a painful childhood memory? No, it's just a web page. So this is really easy to use. You just throw in the CSS and JavaScript on your page. You also need to make sure that you have the Bootstrap transition file, JavaScript, and then just add data action zoom on your images, and you are good to go. So this should be good to go in all relevant browsers, which I believe includes IE8 and up. Very easy to use. If you want to, just check it out in the show notes.
Thanks for zooming through that, Jason.
No problem.
Last up is Flickity. This is touch responsive flickable gallery. So we've all seen this before, the little dots at the bottom and the arrows, and you can kind of go through this slider or carousel or gallery. There's many names for this particular design pattern. But I can also click with my mouse and drag just like that. I think I actually have to release there. There we go. And I can just flick right through these. And of course, it is also touch supported. So this will work on mobile. And you can swipe just like I'm doing here with the mouse. So that's pretty neat. And it's pretty simple and straightforward. You just have this CSS file and this JavaScript file. And you just have to include those into your web page and then add JS Flickity class to the gallery elements. So you have some HTML that looks like this, and then you are good to go. That's it. So that is all we have time for this week. I'm at NickRP on Twitter.
And I am at Seifer. For more information on anything we talked about, check out the links in the show notes right below this video. Thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you next week.